Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello everybody. Today I'm going to talk about critical realism. What's the meaning of critical realism? Before talking about the critical realism, I need to talk first about how could I develop a tool or a software in my PhD thesis. I have a PhD and this PhD is sponsored by an organization, and this organization wants me to develop a tool or a software or a simulation tool or a simulation technique in order to solve its problem. So how can I use it in my PhD? How can I develop a tool in my PhD? This is the point here. Let's remember something very important, that my background is management and I'm now trying to do something more practical, more business related, more practical use. I'm trying to do a tool or a software. This is the point here. For anything, I want to remember something very important. I have two research paradigms. I have two ways of doing PhD. This is the traditional way. This is the old schools. I have talked about them in the last two sessions, but now I just want to remember. The first school is the positivism school. The second school is interpretivism school. The positivism school is called sometimes a science school, the traditional way of doing research. On the other hand, the interpretivism school sometimes is called the qualitative research. Again, positivism, the positivism is based on developing hypotheses and testing them in an objective way, using statistics. On the other hand, interpretivism uses describing what's happened, so we use the interpretivist way, the interpretive way. Sometimes we call this way of thinking epistemology. I think many of you remember that. This is our epistemology. What's the meaning of epistemology? The way of acquiring the knowledge. The way of acquiring the knowledge here is based on testing hypotheses. On the other hand, the way of acquiring knowledge here is just be in the place, listen to the people, talk to the people, just to observe what's happened and just try it. Of course here, you need to validate your results. So you validate your results by validating the questionnaire. Again, positivism is based on questionnaire, so you validate the questionnaire. But here, validation by using interviews. So again, here you use questionnaire in order to get the data and test it using statistically, validate it using statistically. On the other hand, interpretivism using interviews in order to build your model, and then using interviews again in order to validate the model. Okay, there's a question here. How can I develop a tool or a software or a simulation way or a simulation tool by these sources? Which one is more suitable? This is the point. Which one? Unfortunately, most of the people say the interpretivism is the way. How come? Okay, it's very easy. My research will be conducting interviews with people in the industry, talking to them, understanding what they want, and then from my understanding, I will develop a simulation model or a software or a tool based on what they want me to do. Just understand what they want to do and then write it to build a model to solve a problem. I don't solve the problem. I take what they do, what they want me to do, and just write it to present it. Okay. How can you validate the software in this case? Unfortunately, again, you will validate it using interviews. You will talk to other people. Please give me your opinion about my software. Give me your opinion about this tool. Of course, your friends, your experts, they'll say, yeah, it's very good, very good, very good, very good. So, validation here is questioned. We have to think. Positivism will not enable you to develop a tool. How can you develop a tool using questionnaire? I think the questionnaire will not help you because you have a problem, and this problem is a case-specific problem related to a specific company. So your ontology is no single reality. Every company has its problem. So it's supposed by rational to think in this way. So you try to use the epistemology of this way by using interpretivism. Talk to people and understand the problem, write the problem, and then try to find a solution by using a software and present it to them using interviews. The question is, again, do you think that your results are valid? The software really solves the problem? Yes, of course. I talk to people and people say, yeah, it solves the problem. Do you think the market accepts that many people say yes, or some people or your friends say yes? This is the point. So the problem here is validation. Yeah, you acquire the knowledge very good, understand, you will talk to people, understand the problem, but unfortunately you have a problem in validation. Question, you ask your friends, and this is not good, this is not valid, this is not scientific valid for developing a tool or software. This way is very good in validation. Why? Because I validate the result using hypothesis. Do you know what the meaning of hypothesis? Hypothesis means that I have question and I wanted to be sure that the answer is yes or no, just this. Do you think that X affects Y or not? I want to see the relationship between two concepts. This is the hypothesis. So I need to test them objectively. Again, positivism can't solve the problem alone because it's based on questionnaire, but it's very good in validation. Understanding problem is bad because you have a specific problem. On the other hand, interpretivism is very good in understanding the problem, but it's very bad in the validation. That's why we have the third paradigm, which is called critical realism. This is the third school, critical realism. The last time I asked you a question, do you think that we just reflect the reality or we can create the reality? These two ways, in fact, you just reflect the reality. You do questionnaire in order to know the relationship between two concepts. Here, you use interviews and observation in order to describe what's happened. Both ways, you just try to describe the reality. But here, the way is different. You are building the reality, you are developing the reality, you put the reality. How come? What's the meaning of critical realism? First of all, what's the meaning of realism? Before say critical realism. Realism means, in a philosophy, this is a bell. I see, this is a bell, so this is a bell. Realism is that what we see is right, is really. There is no problem in that. This is a board. Why? Because we see this board. When I ask people, do you like this way of doing your job? Yes. So the answer is yes. What's the problem here? This is realism. Critical realism is that we question what we observe. We question the ontology. We question the epistemology. Again, what's the meaning of epistemology? The way of gaining knowledge. So the way of gaining knowledge is that the attitude of people toward the new information system is by questioning people. I will ask people, do you like the system or not? You'll say, yes, I like it. Do you think this way is right or wrong? So I criticize the way of gaining knowledge. What about the ontology? I want to criticize the ontology. The question itself, it should be criticized. The people The fact that I get from people should be criticized. That's why we call it critical realism. We don't just make an interviews to understand the reality, but we have to validate it in an efficient and effective way. So, critical realism, we take the good from each one. This is the critical realism. You interpret the reality by your eyes, you try to observe, you talk to people, yes. And then you validate it in objective way using hypothesis. Give me examples, okay? I have many examples for that, and a lot of PhDs talks about that. First, I wanted to start my PhD. PhD not based on a tool or technique, based on theory. So the first, you need to develop a theory. After developing your theory, you have to use this theory in order to develop tool. I want to apply critical realism on this. I want to develop a theory. Then I want to develop a tool. This is critical realism. We want to develop theory, then we need to develop tool. Tool could be simulation model, could be software, could be assessment tool. I wanted to develop assessment tool, I want to develop simulation model, I want to develop a software. Of course, this is not PhD. In order to take PhD, you have to develop first a theory. Based on theory, you have to develop your model. Be aware, developing your model, your tool, based on interpretivism is very wrong. Why? Yes, that's right to collect the data using interpretivism to develop your theory, but you have to validate the tool using an objective way. This is the point here. How to validate your tool in an objective way. Okay, so let's take examples. How can action research, how can critical realism help? This is the first example. First, you start by making interviews to understand what's happening in the reality, because it's a problem and you need to understand it. So you conduct an interviews. After conducting interviews, you develop your theory. From developing a theory, you develop a tool. From developing a tool, you validate the tool. You validate the tool how? In an objective way. This is the philosophy. But be aware that your theory here is developed using inductive way. What's the meaning of inductive way? You develop your theory based on 2 or 3 cases. So you are flawed in this way of research. You are criticized only by one thing, is that you cannot generalize the results, or it's very hard to generalize the results. Until this, your theory cannot be generalized. But the tool, I don't know. But the theory that you developed based on interviews cannot be generalized. Why? Because your theory based on interview with few people. But it's okay, some people accept it because they try to solve a problem for a specific company. So they, okay, it's based on inductive way, and it's very good. So we develop a theory for solving this problem for this organization. Based on this, I will develop a tool, and this tool should be validated. So this approach, inductive way. Okay. Now, the point here: how you will validate the tool? Don't tell me that you will ask people, is this good tool or not? This is not good. This is not right. So what should I do? You should to try to use it. This is the point here. Try to use it. How can I use it? I need to put it into a system and I observe what's happened before and what's happened after. It's not good way to ask people, is this tool easy or not? This is the interpretative way of validation. This is not good. So what's good? It's good to put your tool or your software to people. And the people try to use it. After using it, you can take the feedback from them. So you put your system into action. Your system is in the work, so people can give you a feedback. Of course, you tell me it's impossible to use it for large organization. I will not put my theory to change the organization. Yes, you can take a prototype, 4 or 5 people, and these people can use your software, your tool, your simulation tool for 5 or 6 days and take feedback from them. People must use the system before give you the feedback. Must. And these people, of course, are supposed to be objective people, to be from the industry, not your friends. And unfortunately, in an interpretive way, a lot of my friends come to me, please Amgad, tell me what's your opinion about my model? Even if it's bad model, I would say it's good. Why? Because they are my friends. So how can I give negative feedback to my friends? Okay, this model is wonderful, tick, 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 yes. And this model is validated and this is reaching. No, that's not right. Validation model should be based on an objective way. Okay, so this is the inductive way. In minutes, inductive way based on interviews, so you can't generalize it. Develop a theory, develop a tool, this tool based on theory, and then validation the tool. The second way is deductive way. How could you develop your theory and develop a model in conductive way? Some people called it sometimes using triangulation. The umbrella here is positivism, but use interpretivism. How? First, I will make interviews in order to understand the problem. Then, translate interviews into questionnaire. Why? To validate and generalize. So you have a model, validated model. Based on validated model, you could build your tool. Again, you will validate your tool in an objective way. Okay, this is an inductive way. Inductive, I think there is no big difference, just you add a questionnaire here in order to generalize the results. Do you think this is only 2 ways? No. We have a third way and fourth way. The third and fourth are very large to describe now, but I wanted to explain it in minutes. The last 2 ways, not aiming to develop a tool or software, but aiming to enhance your research methodology. They are grounded theory, and action research. What is the meaning of grounded theory in critical realism? By the way, grounded theory you can read in many books is interpretivism. Yes, grounded theory can be used in either way. How can you use grounded theory in critical realism? Yes, it will be based on questions open-ended questions, interviews, and these interviews open-ended. But you have to develop dynamic hypotheses. The first meeting with people, you will talk to them, develop a model, and then back again. Go to people again with your model, and you have a hypothesis on the model, and ask people again. So you modify a model, and then you make a modification, a model, new model, customized new model. Again, you talk to another people and talk to them and find a new model based on a dynamic hypothesis. So your questions here are guided based on the interviews. The last thing is the action research. Action research is a big research strategy. Action research means that you do three things. Action research. Three steps. The critical realism in reality explained in action research. This is the model really used in critical realism. This is the firmest approach in critical realism. You do three things. First look, then think, then act. After act, look, think, act. Look, think, act. How come? First, you observe. You observe and make interviews. Observe, make interviews. Develop your theory, develop your model. After that, you think. Develop theory. Finally, you act. You put your theory into action and see what's happened. Put your theory into action. See what's happened. Based on what's happening in action, again, you look. What's happening based on this model. You say this model will change the performance by 10% because these factors in it. Because these factors in it, this is your thing, this is a model. You developed your tool and this tool put into action based on the theory. The tool into action, into organization or in prototype. Based on the action, you observe what's happened. Okay. Some people say it's impossible. What you are talking about is very impossible. Why? Because you will not find any organization accepted that I put new system in it and try to see the results. Yes, that's right. Okay, so what's the solution? How can I use action research? We say that you can take 3 or 4 people and make them as experimental. You talk to people and develop a system for them and you see how they behave with the system and then take your observation and after using the observation you develop a new model, so new tool or advanced technique or new technique or adaptive technique and then give it back to them again to see the progress of a change until you achieve what you want. The second way, which is most used, using archival analysis. What is the meaning of archival analysis? Of course, it couldn't be used in all ways, but some people use it in simulation models. We make patterns and behavior in the data that we have. We get all the documents, historical documents of the organization, the change in attitude, the change in the performance, the change in behavior, the sales, level of expenses, and relate every level of sales and the time by the actions taken by the organization. So I can take different information from different places, put them together to make something like a scenario analysis. Based on this scenario analysis, I can see if I use this system at this time and take this action and use this methodology at this time, it's expected that my performance will increase. Unfortunately, the validation will not be very easy, but archival analysis is very famous. The third way, and most famous is longitudinal. You have an organization, you have panel, and could be used for developing a methodology, not a software, not a tool, but for developing a methodology in taking decisions. So you have your organization and you have a time. We put our performance here, our categories here, and then we make a suggestion to top management or people that responsible for the actions and see what's happened after taking the actions. So based on this diagram, we can say that yes, this methodology is valid or not. Of course, action research has a great drawback. It's not easy to use this research in all cases. You have a big problem that you need a great involvement with the industry, with the company. Because if the company don't want to cooperate with you, you will not be able to use this tool. So you need first to develop a good relationship with your organization, with the company, and then start to use it in an efficient and effective way. Be cautious that you put something into action. So if your theory is mistake or it has a problem, so it could affect the organization in a bad way. So this is very dangerous for your future or even your Ph.D. So take care, you have to put into consideration many factors when you try to do action research. But believe me, action research is the future of research, because no one will accept a tool without a real test. No one will accept a software without a real test. No one will accept a methodology for management without a real test. Again, testing is not easy. Testing is not the major thing. If your methodology or if your tools or if your software not based on a theory, it doesn't add any value. You have to develop your theory first from your understanding of the problem, understanding of the industry, understanding what's happened. After that, you develop a solution. Yes, you can take the opinion before you try to use it, but you have to try to use it. You have to use it. And so, if you are not able to use it in the organization context, you can use a prototype. If you can't use a prototype, at least you try to use archival analysis to see what's happened along the time, the history. If I use scenario analysis, if I use this, so it could happen this. At the end, longitudinal analysis, of course, it's not easy and needs a lot of commitment from you and from your organization. Not the next time, but of course in our course, I will talk heavily on the archival analysis and the longitudinal analysis and the action research. I know I didn't give them the right time. They need a lot of time from me, but now I just want to mention a new concept called critical realism. We have to put into consideration. The last advice for you that please don't read about critical realism from research methodology books. Why? As I told you before, research methodologies, research paradigms like a religion. If I believe in positivism, so the interpretivism people means nothing for me. If I believe in interpretivism, so the positivism means nothing for me. So when you read a positivism book, you will find this book talks about questionnaire, survey, sample, statistical analysis. If you read a book about interpretivism, you will find book talks about interviews, Delphi methods. But of course, you will not find easily a book talks about critical realism. So you will find the first book talks very bad about the critical realism. The second book, which talks about interpretivism, will talk very bad about critical realism. At the end, you will find critical realism is a fantastic way, but it's impossible to implement. And unfortunately, most of people who read research methodology say that. And what that I face in my school, most of people say, don't you read research methodology books if you try to use critical realism. Why? Because if you try to read these books, you will be misguided. So I want to learn about critical realism. So I want to know about critical realism. From where? In fact, I can't depend on the book, so I have to find an alternative way in order to learn about critical realism. I have to learn it from Ph.D. thesis. You have to read it, because if you try to read it from positive books, you will not find a good information. If you try to read it from interpretive books, you will not find a good information. You have to read it from people that really adapt the critical realism methodology, critical realism research. So you have to search for PhD. Which schools that use action research? I don't know much, but of course I can list a few schools, few universities. For example, Cranfield School of Applied Science, Cambridge Institute of Manufacturing. I can also say about Aston Business School, Bath University. Few schools, but already these schools are prominent in the way of critical research. Thank you. Next time we will talk about new things. Thank you. Bye-bye.